I bought a DNA kit, I said casually over breakfast, stirring sugar into my coffee while scrolling through my phone. The morning light filtered through our kitchen window, casting familiar shadows across the table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the past 4 years. My wife Emma froze mid-bite, her spoon suspended halfway between her cereal bowl and her mouth. The silence stretched for several seconds before she managed to speak. "Is our son included?" I nodded, not looking up from my phone. "Yeah, figured it would be fun to see our family tree. The whole package deal. That's when everything changed. Before we dive in, smash that like button and drop a comment if you think Sarah had any idea what was coming next." Emma's spoon clattered into her bowl, milk splashing across the wooden table. Her face went pale, then flushed red, then pale again. Her hands started shaking, not the gentle tremor of too much caffeine, but the violent shake of someone whose world had just shifted off its axis. "Why would you do that?" Her voice cracked. "Why would you waste money on that garbage?" I finally looked up from my phone. "It's just for fun, Em." "What's the big deal?" She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the kitchen floor with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. "You don't trust me." "What?" "Emma, it's a DNA test, not a polygraph. I thought it would be interesting to—" "You don't trust me," she screamed, her voice hitting a pitch I'd never heard before. "After everything we've been through, after I gave you a son, you don't fucking trust me." Then she started sobbing. Not crying. Sobbing. The kind of desperate, body-shaking sobs that come from somewhere deeper than sadness. The kind that come from guilt so heavy it physically hurts. And that's when I knew. I knew that the man I thought I was, devoted husband, loving father, provider, and protector, was actually something else entirely. I was the mark in someone else's con. I was the fool who'd been raising another man's child while the real father watched from the sidelines. I knew that my 3-year-old son, sleeping peacefully in his race car bed upstairs, had never been mine at all. 3.5 years earlier, I'd been the happiest man alive. Emma and I had been trying to get pregnant for 8 months when she finally showed me the positive test. I remember holding that little plastic stick in our bathroom, staring at the 2 pink lines like they were a winning lottery ticket. In a way, they were. Or so I thought. "We're having a baby," she whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. I picked her up and spun her around our tiny apartment, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. We called our parents. We started making lists of names. We argued about whether the nursery should be yellow or green since we wanted to wait to find out the gender. Those were the golden months. The second trimester when Emma glowed with that pregnancy radiance everyone talks about. When we'd spend evenings with her head on my lap while I read parenting books aloud and felt the baby kick against my palm. I worked overtime at the construction company, picking up every available shift to save money for the baby. Emma worked at Morrison & Associates, a mid-size accounting firm downtown, right up until her 8th month. We were the picture of responsible expectant parents, doing everything by the book. The birth was complicated. Emma's labor lasted 18 hours, and there were moments when the doctors looked concerned enough that I started praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in. But when they finally placed Connor in my arms, red-faced and screaming and perfect, I knew what love actually meant for the first time in my life. I was 28 years old, and nothing had ever mattered more than this 7-pound, 2-ounce person who shared my DNA and Emma's smile. Except he didn't share my DNA. And maybe not Emma's smile either, if I'm being honest now. The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and diaper changes and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes with keeping a tiny human alive. I loved every minute of it. Even the 3 a.m. feedings when Connor would scream for an hour straight and nothing Emma or I did seemed to help. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. Emma's constant anxiety that I'd attributed to new mother jitters. The way she flinched when people commented on Connor's features. "He has daddy's eyes," or "look at that chin, just like his father." The stack of baby photos she kept face down in a drawer, claiming she was waiting for the right moment to organize them. Most telling of all, she refused to take family photos for almost a year after Connor was born. I still look awful from the pregnancy, she'd say whenever I suggested it. Let me lose the baby weight first. But Emma had bounced back from pregnancy faster than anyone I knew. By Connor's 6-month birthday, she looked exactly like she had before getting pregnant. Still, whenever I pulled out my phone to capture a moment, Connor's first smile, his first attempt at rolling over, the three of us on Christmas morning, Emma would find an excuse to step away. Take pictures of Connor, she'd say. He's the important one. I should have wondered why she didn't want photographic evidence of our little family. I should have questioned her nervousness around Connor's pediatrician appointments, the way she always volunteered to handle all the paperwork and medical forms alone. Instead, I chalked it up to postpartum anxiety and focused on being the best father I could be. I read Connor bedtime stories every night. I taught him to clap his hands and wave bye-bye. I was there for his first word, Dada, which made me cry like a baby myself, and his first steps, which happened while Emma was at work, and I called her immediately to share the news. Love is blind, they say, but love combined with trust isn't just blind. It's willfully ignorant. For 3 years, I lived in a world where I was Connor's father. Emma was my faithful wife, and our little family was built on a foundation of honesty and commitment. It was the happiest lie I've ever been told. The 23andMe sale notification popped up in my email on a Tuesday morning in March. Discover your family story. 50% off DNA kits this week only. I was drinking coffee in the brake trailer at the construction site where I worked as a foreman, surrounded by the familiar sounds of heavy machinery and shouted instructions. The email seemed harmless enough. One of those impulse purchases that married couples make when they're feeling domestically adventurous. Why not? I thought. Could be fun to see where we all come from. I ordered 3 kits during my lunch break. One for me, one for Emma, one for Connor. The whole family tree exploration package. I imagined us gathered around the kitchen table months later, comparing our genetic maps, learning about distant relatives and ancestral migrations. I pictured Connor getting excited about discovering he was part Irish or Italian or Cherokee, the way kids do when they're learning about the world being bigger and more connected than they realized. The kits arrived on a Saturday. Connor was napping, and Emma was folding laundry in the living room while a cooking show played on the television. I opened the package at the kitchen counter, reading the instructions and laying out the 3 test tubes. "Hey, Em, come look at this," I called out. She walked into the kitchen still holding one of Connor's tiny t-shirts, and I showed her the contents of the package. DNA kits, I explained unnecessarily, since the packaging was clearly labeled. I thought we could all do them together. See what kind of genetic hodgepodge Connor inherited from us. Emma's face went through a series of expressions so quickly I almost missed them. Confusion, recognition, fear, and then something that looked like panic before settling into forced casualness. "Why would you waste money on that crap?" she asked, but her voice sounded strained, like she was trying too hard to sound normal. It was only $90 for all 3. I figured it would be interesting. Interesting how? What are you hoping to find? There was an edge to her voice that I'd never heard before. Not anger exactly, but something sharper and more defensive. I don't know. Family history, health information. Maybe we have some exotic ancestry we don't know about. Or maybe we don't need to know every little detail about our genetics. Maybe some things are better left alone. I studied her face, trying to understand why she seemed so agitated about what should have been a harmless curiosity. "Em, what's wrong? You seem upset." "I'm not upset. I just think it's stupid to spend money on something we don't need." "Since when do you care about $90? You spent more than that on Connor's shoes last month." "That's different. Those were necessities. And this is fun. When did you become anti-fun?" That's when she really spiraled. "You don't trust me," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? You want to check up on me. You want to make sure Connor is really yours." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Not because it was true, the thought had honestly never crossed my mind, but because of how quickly she'd leaped to that conclusion. "Emma, what the hell are you talking about? I bought DNA kits because I saw a sale and thought it would be interesting. Where is this coming from?" You've been different lately. Distant, suspicious. Suspicious of what? I don't know. But why else would you suddenly decide we need to test Connor's DNA? I set the test kits down on the counter and looked at my wife. Really looked at her. Her face was flushed. Her hands were shaking slightly, and her eyes had a wild quality I'd never seen before. Emma, listen to me. I have never, not once, questioned whether Connor is my son. The DNA test has nothing to do with paternity. It's about ancestry and health information. But even as I said the words, something cold was beginning to form in my stomach. Not doubt, exactly, but the recognition that her reaction was completely disproportionate to the situation. If you do this, she said quietly, it will ruin everything. Ruin what? Our family, our marriage, everything we've built. How could a DNA test ruin our family? She didn't answer. Instead, she walked out of the kitchen and went upstairs. I heard our bedroom door slam shut. I stood alone in the kitchen, holding 3 innocent-looking test tubes, and felt the first crack appear in the foundation of everything I'd believed about my life. That night, Emma didn't come down for dinner. I made grilled cheese sandwiches for Connor and myself, and we ate while watching cartoons on the couch. Connor seemed to sense that something was wrong. He was more clingy than usual, wanting to sit on my lap instead of next to me. "Where's Mama?" he asked in the way 3-year-olds do, with complete trust that I would have a simple, satisfying answer. "Mama's not feeling well," I told him. "She needs to rest." When I put Connor to bed that night, I lingered in his room longer than usual. He looked so small in his toddler bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and picture books. His breathing was soft and steady, and his face had the perfect peace that only children can achieve in sleep. I studied his features in the dim light from his nightlight. His hair was lighter than mine and Emma's, a soft brown with gold highlights that caught the light. His eyes were hazel, while mine were brown and Emma's were blue. His nose was small and straight, different from my broader nose or Emma's slightly upturned one. But kids don't always look exactly like their parents. Genetics is complicated. Recessive genes can skip generations. I'd seen plenty of families where the children looked nothing like either parent but exactly like a grandparent or great aunt. Still, I found myself studying Connor's sleeping face with new attention, looking for myself in his features and not finding as much as I'd expected. When I went to bed that night, Emma was already asleep, or pretending to be. She was turned away from me, curled up in a tight ball on her side of the bed. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and replaying our conversation in the kitchen. Why would a DNA test ruin our family? What was Emma afraid I might discover? And why, for the first time since Connor was born, was I starting to wonder if I really knew my wife at all? I didn't confront Emma the next morning. Instead, I did what any rational person would do when faced with a puzzle that didn't make sense. I started gathering information. The DNA kits sat on our kitchen counter for 3 days like unexploded ordnance. Emma avoided the kitchen entirely, making coffee in our bedroom with the small machine she usually only used when she was sick. She took Connor to daycare early and picked him up late, scheduling her life to minimize time at home. On Wednesday, while Emma was at work and Connor was at daycare, I started digging through our old files. I pulled out Connor's birth certificate, studying details I'd barely glanced at when I'd proudly framed it 3 years earlier. Born at Mercy General Hospital on October 15th at 3:47 a.m. Weight, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Length, 20 inches. Father, Michael James Thompson. Mother, Emma Louise Thompson. I was listed as the father. My name was right there in official black ink. But anyone can put any name on a birth certificate if the real father isn't present to contest it. Next, I found Emma's medical records from her pregnancy, the ones she'd kept in a folder marked baby stuff in our filing cabinet. I'd never looked through them carefully before. Emma had handled all the medical appointments and paperwork while I focused on working extra hours to save money. According to her doctor's notes, Emma's last menstrual period had been in early January. Connor was born in mid-October, which would make him a full-term baby conceived around late January or early February. I got my phone and opened the calendar app, scrolling back to that time period. Late January 2021. Where had I been? What had we been doing? Then I remembered. I'd been out of town for almost 3 weeks in February 2021, working on an emergency construction project in Phoenix after a flash flood damaged a shopping center. It was good money. Overtime pay plus per diem. And Emma had encouraged me to take the job. "We need the money for the baby fund," she'd said. "I'll be fine here." It's only a few weeks. I'd called her every night from my hotel room in Phoenix. We'd video chatted before bed, and she'd seemed normal. Happy, even. She'd sent me pictures of herself around town. At the grocery store, at lunch with friends, at her office. But now I was wondering, what had she been doing when she wasn't on the phone with me? I pulled out my laptop and logged into our joint bank account, scrolling back to February 2021. Most of the transactions were routine. Groceries, gas, her usual coffee shop purchases. But there were several charges I didn't recognize. Dinner at Bella Vista, an expensive Italian restaurant downtown. $127 for 2 people. 2 movie tickets at the luxury theater across town. $34. A hotel room in Santa Barbara for 1 night. $189. When I'd asked about the Santa Barbara charge at the time, Emma had said she'd needed a mental health weekend to prepare for the pregnancy stress. "Just me and some books and room service," she'd explained. But the hotel receipt, which I found buried in our credit card statements, showed charges for 2 key cards. My hands were shaking as I opened another file folder, this one containing Connor's medical records from his first year. Routine pediatric visits, vaccination records, growth charts, and blood type information from his newborn screening. Connor's blood type, O negative. Emma's blood type, A positive. My blood type, B positive. I stared at the paper for a long time, trying to remember high school biology. 2 parents with A and B blood types could have a child with A or B blood. But O negative? That required 2 O parents, unless one of the parents wasn't actually a parent. I closed the medical records and sat at our kitchen table, looking around the room where we'd shared thousands of meals, where Connor had learned to use a spoon, where Emma and I had planned our future together. Everything looked the same. The refrigerator covered with Connor's artwork, the coffee maker Emma used every morning, the fruit bowl I'd bought at a farmer's market during our 2nd year of marriage. But nothing was the same. I was sitting in a house built on lies, surrounded by evidence of a life that had never been real. The DNA kits were still sitting on the counter where I'd left them 4 days earlier. I picked up the one labeled Connor and read the instructions again. Simple saliva test. Mail it in. Results in 6 to 8 weeks. But I didn't need to wait 6 to 8 weeks to know what the results would show. I already knew that Connor wasn't my biological son. I already knew that Emma had been lying to me for over 3 years. I already knew that the man I thought I was, Connor's father, Emma's faithful husband, was a fiction. What I didn't know was what to do with that information. I could confront Emma, demand the truth, try to salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. I could pretend I'd never seen the evidence, go back to living the happy lie, raise Connor as if nothing had changed. Or I could do what I'd learned to do during my years in construction. Assess the structural damage, determine what could be saved, and make a plan to rebuild on a foundation that wouldn't collapse. I took pictures of every document with my phone: birth certificate, medical records, credit card statements, hotel receipts. I uploaded them to a secure cloud storage account Emma didn't know about. Then I mailed Connor's DNA kit. Not to find out if he was my son. I already knew he wasn't. To have proof. The DNA results arrived on a Tuesday afternoon 6 weeks later. I was home alone, having taken a half day off work to handle some paperwork for a new construction project. Emma was at her office, Connor was at daycare, and the house felt unusually quiet. The envelope was thin and official looking, with the 23andMe logo in the corner. I sat at our kitchen table and opened it carefully, though I already knew what it would say. 0% paternal match. The words were printed in clean, black font on crisp white paper. Below that, a detailed breakdown of genetic markers and probability calculations that confirmed what I'd already figured out from blood types and Emma's panicked reaction. Connor was not my biological child. I read the report 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed time to process how it felt to see my worst fear confirmed in official documentation. Strangely, I felt calm. The uncertainty of the past 6 weeks had been worse than knowing the truth. At least now I could make decisions based on facts instead of suspicions. I scanned the report and uploaded it to the same secure cloud account where I'd stored the other evidence. Then I made copies and put the originals in a safety deposit box at a bank across town. Over the next week, I began collecting additional evidence without Emma's knowledge. I installed monitoring software on our shared computer and began tracking Emma's internet activity. I found email accounts I didn't know existed, social media profiles she'd never mentioned, and a trail of deleted messages that recovery software could still access. What I found was a pattern of deception that went back to the beginning of our marriage. Emma had been having an affair with her supervisor at Morrison and Associates, a married man named David Reeves, for over 4 years. The relationship had started shortly after Emma was hired at the firm, months before she and I had even begun trying to get pregnant. Their text messages told the story I'd been too trusting to see. David was Connor's biological father. Emma had known from the beginning, but she'd chosen to let me believe the child was mine because David wasn't willing to leave his wife, and Emma needed financial stability. "Mike will be a good father," she'd texted David when she first found out she was pregnant. "And he makes good money. Connor will be better off with him thinking he's the dad." "Are you sure about this?" David had replied. "What if he finds out?" "He won't. He trusts me completely, and even if he does find out later, Connor will be old enough that Mike won't want to abandon him. He's too good a guy for that." I sat in my truck outside Connor's daycare after reading those messages, watching other parents pick up their children, and tried to process the level of calculation involved in Emma's deception. She hadn't just cheated on me. She'd gotten pregnant by another man, convinced me the child was mine, and spent 3 years letting me pour my heart and soul into raising a child who would never be legally or biologically mine. Worse, she'd counted on my love for Connor to keep me trapped even if I discovered the truth. She was probably right. If I'd found out after Connor was older, after he'd started calling me daddy with real understanding, after we'd built more shared memories and deeper bonds, I might have stayed. I might have decided that biology mattered less than the relationship we'd built. But Connor was 3 years old. He was young enough that a gentle transition to a new living situation wouldn't traumatize him. He was old enough to remember me fondly, but young enough to adapt to changes in his family structure. And I was young enough, 31 years old, to start over with someone who wouldn't lie to me about something as fundamental as whose child I was raising. That evening, after Emma put Connor to bed, I sat in our living room pretending to watch television while she worked on her laptop at the kitchen table. She seemed more relaxed than she had in weeks, probably assuming that my failure to mention DNA results meant the kits had been forgotten or lost in the mail. "I'm going to take a shower," she announced around 9 p.m., closing her laptop and heading upstairs. I waited until I heard the water running, then quietly opened her laptop. She'd left her email account logged in, something she'd never done before. Apparently, she felt secure enough in her deception to get careless about covering her tracks. Her most recent email exchange with David was from that morning. "Mike seems back to normal," Emma had written. "I think we're in the clear. He probably forgot about the DNA thing. You know how he is with details that don't relate to work." David's response? "Good." I was worried for a while there. "Jennifer is starting to get suspicious about my schedule. We need to be more careful for a few weeks." Jennifer was David's wife. I took screenshots of their entire email thread going back 4 years. Then I closed the laptop and went to our bedroom, where Emma was now blow-drying her hair in the bathroom. "I'm going to run to the store," I called over the noise of the hairdryer. "We're out of milk." "Okay," she called back. "Love you." "Love you too," I replied automatically, though the words felt strange in my mouth. Instead of going to the store, I drove to a 24-hour print shop and made copies of everything: DNA results, email screenshots, financial records, hotel receipts, medical documents. I put the copies in a manila envelope and mailed them to Rebecca Chen, the attorney who had helped me with some construction contract issues the previous year. Then I drove home and told Emma the store had been out of the organic milk Connor liked, so I decided to try again tomorrow. We went to bed like a normal married couple. Emma fell asleep quickly, her breathing deep and regular beside me. I lay awake until dawn, making plans. I took a vacation day on Friday, telling my crew supervisor I had some family business to handle. Emma went to work as usual, dropping Connor at daycare on her way. At 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into Pacific Coast Bank, where Emma and I had maintained our joint checking and savings accounts for the past 5 years. "I need to freeze our joint accounts," I told the branch manager, showing him my identification and account access cards. "I have reason to believe there's been fraudulent activity." It wasn't technically true. Emma hadn't stolen money from our accounts, but she had stolen 3 years of my life, and I wasn't interested in making things easy for her. The accounts were frozen within 10 minutes. Emma would discover this when she tried to buy lunch that afternoon. My next stop was the courthouse, where I filed for divorce. Rebecca Chen had prepared all the paperwork based on the evidence I'd mailed her. The DNA test results were attached as Exhibit A, along with printed copies of Emma's email correspondence with David. "This is pretty straightforward," Rebecca told me as we reviewed the documents. "Adultery, paternity fraud, and emotional distress. She won't get alimony, and you won't have any financial obligations regarding the child." "What about Connor?" I asked. "I mean, I know he's not mine biologically, but I've been his father for 3 years." "That's up to you. You can pursue visitation rights if you want to maintain a relationship with him. But given the circumstances, most men choose to make a clean break." I thought about Connor's face when I read him bedtime stories, the way he ran to me when I came home from work, how he'd started copying the way I walked and talked. I need to think about that part. "Take your time. The divorce proceedings will take a few months anyway." From the courthouse, I drove to Morrison and Associates. I'd only been to Emma's office a few times, company holiday parties, the occasional lunch date, but I knew where it was located and how to find the Human Resources Department. "I have some information about employee misconduct that your company should be aware of," I told the HR director, a professional-looking woman in her 40s named Patricia Williams. I showed her printed copies of Emma's email correspondence with David, highlighting the messages that had been sent during work hours using company computers. "This appears to show a sexual relationship between a supervisor and subordinate," I explained. "I thought your company should know since it could create liability issues." Patricia's expression grew more concerned as she read through the emails. "How did you obtain these communications?" she asked. "They were sent from my wife's personal email account, which she accessed on devices in our shared household. The emails reference company time, company computers, and company facilities being used for personal relationships." "I see. And you are?" "Emma Thompson's husband. Soon-to-be ex-husband." Patricia made notes while she reviewed the documentation. "We'll need to investigate this internally. Thank you for bringing it to our attention." "There's one more thing," I said. "David Reeves is also married. His wife might be interested to know that he's been having an affair with a subordinate for 4 years, and that he fathered a child with her." I handed Patricia a separate envelope containing copies of the same emails, along with David's home address. "This envelope is for Mrs. Jennifer Reeves," I said. "I thought she deserved to know." My final stop of the day was Connor's daycare center. I needed to update his emergency contact information and make sure Emma couldn't simply pick him up and disappear once she realized what was happening. "I'm going through a divorce," I explained to the center director. "There's going to be some confusion about custody arrangements over the next few weeks. For now, only I should be picking Connor up unless you hear otherwise directly from me." She made notes in Connor's file. "We'll need court documentation if there are formal custody orders." "I'll have that soon. For now, just please make sure Connor doesn't leave with anyone except me." By 4 p.m., I was home, sitting in our living room with a beer and waiting for the first domino to fall. Emma's panicked phone call came at 4:37 p.m. "Mike, there's something wrong with my debit card. The store says our account is frozen. Can you call the bank?" "No," I said calmly. "I froze the accounts." Silence on the other end of the line. "What do you mean you froze them?" "I mean I went to the bank this morning and froze our joint checking and savings accounts." "You can't do that. Half that money is mine." "Actually, I can, and I did." "Mike, what's going on?" "Why would you—" "I know about David." The line went quiet except for the sound of her breathing. "I know Connor isn't my son. I know you've been lying to me for over 3 years. I know about the hotels, the dinners, the fake business trips. Mike, I can explain. No need to explain. I have copies of all your emails, the DNA test results, financial records, hotel receipts, everything. Where are you? I'm at home. I'm coming home. Don't do anything else until we can talk. Take your time, I said. I'll be here. I hung up and finished my beer, then started making dinner for Connor and myself. Whatever happened next, Connor still needed to eat. Emma burst through our front door at 5:23 p.m., her face flushed and her eyes wild with panic. Connor was in his high chair eating chicken nuggets and apple slices, chattering about something that had happened at daycare. "Hi, Mama," he said cheerfully, kicking his feet against his chair. Emma forced a smile and kissed the top of his head. "Hi, baby. Mama needs to talk to Daddy for a minute, okay?" She grabbed my arm and pulled me into our bedroom, closing the door behind us. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed, keeping her voice low so Connor wouldn't hear. "I'm ending our marriage," I said matter-of-factly. "I filed for divorce this morning. You'll be served papers tomorrow." "Mike, you're not thinking clearly. You're angry, and you have every right to be, but this isn't the way to handle it." "How should I handle it, Emma?" "How should a man handle finding out his wife has been lying to him about whose child he's been raising? Connor is your child. Biology doesn't matter. You've been his father for 3 years. Biology matters when it comes to lies. Biology matters when it comes to the fact that you've let me build my entire identity around being a father to a child who isn't mine." Emma sat on the edge of our bed, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. "I was going to tell you," she said, "when he was older, when it wouldn't hurt him." "When were you going to tell David's wife?" Emma's face went pale. "What?" "When were you going to tell Jennifer Reeves that her husband fathered a child with his subordinate? Or were you planning to keep that secret forever too?" "Mike, please don't involve Jennifer. She doesn't need to know about this." "She already knows. I made sure she got copies of all your emails this afternoon." "You what?" "I also made sure your HR department knows about your inappropriate relationship with your supervisor. Something tells me Morrison and Associates has policies about that kind of thing." Emma stood up suddenly, her face cycling through shock, anger, and desperation. "You're trying to destroy my life." "I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. You destroyed your own life when you decided to build it on lies. What about Connor? What happens to him while you're getting your revenge?" That question hit me harder than I'd expected. I'd been so focused on the betrayal and deception that I hadn't fully processed what this meant for the little boy eating dinner in our kitchen, who had no idea his world was about to change completely. "Connor will be fine," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "He's young enough to adapt. David is his biological father. David can step up and take responsibility for his son. David won't leave his wife. He's made that clear. He wants Jennifer to never find out about any of this." Well, that ship has sailed. Jennifer knows now. David can choose to be a father to Connor or not, but either way, he's going to have to deal with the consequences of his choices. And what about me? What am I supposed to do? I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, sitting on our bed in the room where we'd slept together for 4 years, where we'd talked about our dreams and fears, where we'd made love and planned our future. She looked smaller now, diminished by the weight of her exposed lies. "I don't know, Emma. That's not my problem anymore." "Mike, please. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through it." "There's nothing to work through. You didn't make mistakes. You made calculated decisions over a period of years. You chose to lie to me about the most important thing in the world. You chose to let me fall in love with a child who isn't mine while you continued your relationship with his real father. You do love Connor. That part isn't fake. No, that part isn't fake. But everything else is. Our marriage is fake. Our family is fake. The person I thought I was married to doesn't exist." Emma was crying harder now, The kind of desperate sobbing that comes when someone realizes they've lost everything they thought they could control. "What can I do?" she asked. "Tell me what I can do to fix this." "You can't fix it. Some things once broken can't be repaired." I walked to our closet and pulled out a suitcase I'd hidden behind winter coats that afternoon. "I'm staying at a hotel tonight. I'll come back tomorrow to get more of my things while you're at work." "You're leaving? Just like that?" "Emma, our marriage ended the moment you decided to lie to me about Connor's paternity. I'm just making it official." "What am I supposed to tell Connor?" "Tell him the truth. He's old enough to understand that sometimes families change." "I can't do this alone." "You're not alone. You have David, the father of your child, the man you chose over your husband." I picked up the suitcase and headed toward the bedroom door. "Mike, wait." I turned around. "I love you," she said desperately. "I've always loved you. David was just a mistake that got out of control. A mistake that lasted 4 years and produced a child?" "Yes, no. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I was confused. I was young when I started working at Morrison and Associates. David was older, sophisticated, successful. He made me feel important. And I didn't? You did. But differently. You were safe, stable, reliable. David was exciting. So you kept us both, the reliable husband to pay the bills and raise the exciting lover's child." "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." I opened the bedroom door and walked back to the kitchen, where Connor was finishing his apple slices. Emma followed me, still crying. "Daddy, why's Mama sad?" Connor asked, looking between us with the intuitive concern that children have when they sense adult distress. I knelt down next to his high chair and smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Mama's just having a hard day, buddy." Sometimes grown-ups get sad about things. Are you sad too? I looked into his hazel eyes. David's eyes, I realized now, and felt something break inside my chest. "Yeah, I'm a little sad too. But it's not your fault, okay? Sometimes sad things happen, but they're never because of kids. Adult problems are always about adults. Will you read me a story tonight?" "Not tonight, Connor. I have to go somewhere. But I'll see you soon, okay?" "Where are you going?" "Just away for a little while." Connor's face scrunched up in confusion. "Are you coming back?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Emma was watching us from across the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. "I'll always care about you," I told Connor, which was true but didn't answer his question. "You're a good kid and I want you to remember that, okay?" I kissed his forehead and stood up, avoiding Emma's eyes as I headed for the front door. "Mike, please don't do this," Emma called after me. "We can figure it out. We can make it work." There is no we anymore, Emma. There never really was. I walked out the front door of the house where I'd lived for 4 years, where I'd brought Connor home from the hospital, where I'd thought I was building a life based on love and honesty. I didn't look back. The next few days unfolded with the mechanical precision of a controlled demolition. Emma called 17 times on Saturday. I didn't answer any of the calls, but I listened to her voicemails from my hotel room, each one more desperate than the last. "Mike, please call me back. We need to talk about this rationally." I went to the bank. They said you have to be there to unfreeze the accounts. I don't have any money for groceries. Connor keeps asking where you are. I don't know what to tell him. My mom called. Someone told her about the divorce. My whole family knows now. David's wife showed up at my office today. She was screaming at me in the lobby. Everyone saw. I think I'm going to lose my job. HR wants to meet with me on Monday. Mike, I know you're angry, but you're hurting Connor too. He doesn't understand why you left. The last voicemail came at 11:47 p.m. on Saturday night. I know you hate me. I know I deserve everything that's happening. But please don't abandon Connor. Whatever you think of me, he loves you. You're the only father he's ever known. I played that message 3 times. staring at the ceiling of my generic hotel room, trying to reconcile my love for Connor with my need to escape the web of lies that Emma had built around our family. On Sunday morning, Emma sent a text instead of calling. David got fired. Jennifer threw him out. He says he can't help with Connor financially because he has to pay for his own place now, and Jennifer is taking half his assets in their divorce. I don't know what to do. I stared at the text for a long time before responding. That's not my problem. Her reply came immediately. How can you be so cold? This is about a 3-year-old child. This is about consequences. David is Connor's father. Figure it out with him. You know David won't step up. He's never wanted to be a real father. Then maybe you shouldn't have had a child with him. Mike, please. Connor needs stability. He needs you. I turned off my phone and went for a drive along the coast, trying to clear my head. Was it better for him to have a loving but false father figure, or to learn early that some situations require difficult choices and fresh starts? I spent hours driving and thinking, and by evening I'd reached a decision that felt both heartbreaking and necessary. On Monday morning, I called Rebecca Chen. I want to relinquish all parental rights and responsibilities regarding Connor, I told her. Clean break. No visitation, no financial obligations, no future contact. Are you sure? You can change your mind later if you want to maintain some kind of relationship with him. I'm sure. It's better for everyone, especially Connor, if this is final. Okay, I'll prepare the paperwork. That afternoon, Emma was served with divorce papers at her office. According to my sources, the security guard at Morrison & Associates whom I'd met during company events, she broke down crying in the lobby and had to be escorted to her car by security. She was also called into a meeting with HR and terminated for violating company policies regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates. Apparently, David had confirmed their affair during his own termination meeting, hoping to save his job by claiming he was the victim of seduction by a subordinate. It hadn't worked.